Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon's webinar. We're just going to give it a few seconds, as always, just to let everyone settle in. So thank you for joining us. Always seems like the longest minute. Okay, so I think we'll start. So thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to be discussing the GPA survey, Global Payroll and HR of the Future. My name is Melanie Pitsey and I'm the CEO of the GPA. James Adkins, over to you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hello, everyone. So I'm James Adkins, the head of commercial for our HR consulting business, looking after the HR consulting, as it says, really. So, yeah.
And I'm Fran Williams. I'm the product director of Iris FMP, and I'm going to take you through the agenda for today's session. So what we've done introductions already. We're going to move shortly on to the results of the Global Payroll and HR of the Future. And then we'll have a short presentation on Iris FMP, a couple of slides on what we do, and then we'll move into the Q&A section of the webinar. If you want to ask any questions as part of that, there's facilities available to do so. So Mel, I'm going to hang back to you to tell us a little bit about GPA and the survey that we've done.
Yeah, thanks, Fran. Just to also mention, this is being recorded and it will be available after or post webinar, and also we'll have the slides. So just to let you know about the GPA, we're a global payroll association and we offer training, membership. We have in-depth country resources. Actually, RSFMP also support us with that. We have about 40,000 in the community. So just to let you know who actually answered the survey, we had 165 respondents. 44% of those actually came from the United States, 40% originated in Europe and the UK, and the remainder were from the rest of the world. 2/3 of the respondents also represented organisations of over 1,000 global employees. So we had a really decent input or respondents from a variety of different countries and also at different levels. 60% of the respondents also work within technology or service-based industries. So some interesting people who answered this.
Thanks, Mel. And let's now get into the questions. And apologies in advance, there's quite a lot of data in here, insightful data that has come as a result of the survey. It's quite a lot of graphs, but we're going to mix it up a bit by introducing Mel and James to give a bit of insight into some of the questions and the answers that we've got. So I'm going to move into the kind of first question, really. And that was all around the coronavirus and whether it slowed down organisations' global expansion plans over the last year. And remember, this survey was done in May 2021. So in terms of the respondents that had thought it kind of slowed down their progress, around about kind of 24% said it did. 35% were kind of in the middle, so they neither agreed or disagreed, but around about 40% of the respondents said that the pandemic had slowed down their globalization plans. Now, James, do you want to give your views on this?
Yeah, of course. And actually, this question 8 goes into question 9 at the same time. The results kind of give a similar response or answer to it. But I think what's actually interesting is the people that disagreed more than anything. Through COVID in 2020, there are a lot of lessons that we learned in business and a lot of resilience that we had to kind of evolve to and react to within the market. And I think the key points that we were looking at throughout 2020 was businesses really, whilst they had to grow, were looking at had to stay on top of the markets and be dynamic. look at building out their knowledge of the industry and the markets that we're looking at going into. And ultimately, with global expansion comes the attraction of talent, and finding talent during a pandemic is obviously incredibly challenging. So I think these answers really are what we are expecting within this. So Fran, if you want to just kind of skip forward to question 9, that kind of comes into a bit more about that. So did you want to cover question 9, Fran's results?
Yeah, so the follow on for that question is, particularly now the global vaccination program is rolling out across the globe. Do organisations feel a bit more positive about their global expansion? And you can see there, fundamentally, you've got almost 2/3 of businesses feel a lot more positive about that program, which is really encouraging, because they're starting to think about entering new countries and kind of maybe executing on those plans that they've held back on over the last year. Now, Mel, do you want to come in and kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, we're seeing from the GPA community that that they're getting prepared, that they feel more positive. It feels like sort of with the COVID situation, that it was more of a blip on the horizon, and they're now looking forward to what needs to be done when things get to the new norm. Obviously everyone's guessing what the new norm is. We don't really know yet, do we? But it definitely seems to be more of a positive situation. We also came across some other research where 166 CFOs and VPs of finance were surveyed, and 100% of them said that they're ready to expand into new countries where they do not currently operate in. So I think generally people are now looking to the future, and I do hope it is just a blip. I think we're all ready, aren't we, to start moving on? I think majority of us are.
We hope so.
Good.
Yeah.
So into the next set of questions, one of the questions we wanted to know is, what countries are they looking to move into, and why are they looking to move into those countries? So in terms of why, it's clear, in particular if we look at the top 3, that it's all about businesses beginning to effectively expand where they can sell or grow. So you can see there in particular the top 3 answers to why you're looking to expand, particularly were around attracting new customers into new segments, to grow market share, and clearly to achieve that organisation's long-term growth objectives. I think the one for me that was a bit further down the kind of answers, maybe 10 years ago, organisations were looking at more at offshoring, but you can see over the last decade it's more about growth now. So as we move on to question 11, and we're going to bring James in on this, in terms of the countries that they were looking to move into, obviously it's dependent on which country they're in, and we had responses from all over the globe. But the top 3, you can see there are Latin America, Asia and Europe. James, do you want to give your insight into why you think they're moving into those countries?
Yeah, absolutely. So traditionally, most businesses, first stepping stone over the pond or overseas would be coming into Europe, because the natural curve, especially for American businesses, is to go to an English-speaking country like the UK. But most interestingly, and I think the biggest point that we can take away from all of this, is what Asia have done. So Asia as a whole have been quite forward-thinking. Obviously, they are slightly ahead of the curve, but they've introduced measures to kind of increase their industry and business within that. So I'm surprised really with the results with the 45 within Asia. What we've probably found is the most kind of interesting things is that there has been those countries have kind of acted on their feet a bit more. So obviously South Korea as a country have obviously gone through pandemics in the past. Thailand have looked at diversifying industry. Japan invested a huge amount of money into a stimulus package. And then actually, even if you look at Singapore, they introduced a kind of, what would be the word, like immigration piece. So like an item called Tech Pass, which is a a kind of visa that people could use to come in, and that's to stimulate the tech industry. And obviously China, other superpower within all of that, and they've managed to introduce various measures to keep the economy going. So to answer your question, Fran, I think China is probably the most, or not China, but Asia as a whole, is the most interesting movement that people are making.
Thank you, James. So moving on to question 13, how soon are these organisations looking to move? Well, I think it's clear within the answers that you can see that some of them haven't kind of made those concrete plans yet. So 42% of the respondents said they had no definitive time frame, but in particular, it's that kind of 38% of organisations that are looking to move into a new territory or country within the next 12 months. That it's key that with the changes, particularly off the back of the pandemic, that they're sort of on board with the local legislation, and they'll start to be looking at that now, as will the 20% of organisations looking to move in the next kind of 12 and 24 months. So moving on to the next section, and we are skipping between question numbers. Why do those organisations consider these locations to be attractive? So you remember, for example, Asia came out as quite strongly in Latin America now. So why is that? Why do the respondents think that? Well, you can see there in terms of a percentage, it seems to be a lot around, the access to diverse skills and talent, but in particular, the ease of doing business. And you can see that that's coming out second with 27%, with progressive economic policies coming just behind that. It's worth pointing out that this survey was done in May. That was before the G7 agreed to a minimum kind of corporation tax level. So it'll be interesting to see if any of these kind of the dynamics of these responses change over time with that news, particularly because competitive tax system is quite a low rank. Maybe not, but we'll see. So the top three reasons, just for clarity: progressive economies, ease of doing business, and top by quite a margin is access to diverse skills. So moving on to the next section, this goes into a bit more detail around the barriers that the respondents thought they were going to have when they enter these new countries. So it's no surprise to see, in particular with this, that you've got, because of the audience processing payroll and being GPA members, that adhering to different payroll processes as they enter these countries is one of the significant barriers. But in particular, the clear kind of leader in there is local employment legislation and applying to regulatory compliance. But interestingly, Mel, mandatory benefits and insurance has come out in the top three as well. Do you want to say a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I could have, if I was betting, I could have put the employment legislation and compliance at the top, because everyone struggles with this. Even companies that have payrolls in countries still struggle with compliance, and all the different payroll processes. In some ways, that's why the GPA was formed, to help the community with these issues. And and it hasn't changed in the last 5-10 years. This is always one of the barriers or the top issues that people have. And I think one of the key things that people need to be aware of is that they assume when they choose a payroll provider that the payroll provider will tell them of different legislation changes or policy changes or things that they need to know. And if it's not in the contract, then they won't get told. So some of the GPA community actually get caught out by this with penalties, because they're assuming that their provider is going to tell them what changes are happening, or what needs to be done within country, and they have a nasty little shock when they get a penalty. So yeah, this doesn't surprise me. And I think, James, you're the man on the mandatory benefits and insurance side of things.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say the man, but yeah, I'll give it a go. So yeah, you touched on a few things about the compliance piece and things changing, but also payroll providers not telling you. If you look at France as a kind of pure example, we have a lot of clients that come to us to say, oh yeah, can you set up payroll or set up our HR infrastructure or audit us for France? But their current suppliers haven't actually informed them that it's now you're legally required to have two things: mutuelle and prévoyance within France, which is the death and disability insurance, and the life cover. But also there are mandatory medical checks every year, which if you say that to someone that they just don't know, it kind of completely goes over the head, and they say, well, it's not something that we've ever done or ever known of. These sorts of things are incredibly important. They're all mandatory. And that always comes back to the thing Fran touched on about attracting talent. If you're not providing the right things locally, your talent aren't going to be particularly happy. They're probably not going to want to stay around, or you'll get a terrible reputation within the market, and you won't actually be able to attract the right talent to grow.
Thanks, James. So we are going to skip through some of these questions, and there's a reason for that. It's going to be available in the white paper that Mel's currently working on, and I think we'll be ready for early next week. But secondly, we've got some really more stronger insight we want to share with you. I think the two call outs for me is there's a mixture of different places that organisations are going to, whether it be for international HR support or payroll support. I wouldn't draw too much conclusion for people saying we've got nothing in place. We think that's more because either they're thinking about moving into a country or they've just recently signed up with a GPA to get some guidance around that. But in particular, you can see that it's a bit of a mix between people are consuming either HR expertise internally or they're going to outside consultancies as well. And a similar thing for payroll. They're either running it with internal local country software or they're going to a local service provider. So we'll skip this section and we'll move on to what we think is some really kind of interesting and insightful commentary, and that's around question 19. So we asked the respondents how they feel about their global payroll benefits, payments and HR processes working together and how well they were aligned. So you can see with the respondents, kind of 25% disagreed, I think, saying that they don't think it works well together. 22% were on the fence, and then you've got almost 51% of respondents feeling like their processes are well aligned and work together. And James, I think you've got some insight on this.
Yeah, well, the thing to obviously look at is not all companies have the time or resource to hire global experts and set up international payrolls. Even if they did have the resource available, it is a race against the competition, falling behind obviously everything. It can be quite a cumbersome process. There are probably 5 significant challenges that companies face when setting up a payroll and HR and obviously payment system. It's compliance, adapting locally, data protection, the cultural divide, and also the governance of the whole kind of setup. The main thing is that clients will use to grow or pull this all together is having a clear strategy. And the first step to that strategy is looking at addressing compliance, technology and processes, effectiveness and scalability of who you're going to be using to do that. Once you have those fundamental pieces in place, it's kind of easier to put everything together and utilize and maximize the resource you've got available to you.
Thanks, James. So on to question 20, and this was one that was really interesting for us because it's something that we do, but we asked the question of the respondents, did they see the benefit in outsourcing payroll benefits, payments and HR services to one single global payroll and HR provider? And overwhelmingly, you can see in the results, right, that almost 66% of people agree that they see the benefits in doing so. And Mel, have you got some insight you can share into that?
Yeah, so this doesn't surprise me at all. I think during the pandemic, one thing that happened was payroll and HR were in the spotlight, especially with business owners or C-suite needing to get answers, needing to know what the salary costs are. Generally that's the highest cost, isn't it, in any business. And I think from the GPA community, that could be or has been a struggle if you've got a number of different providers. We have some results that it can take over a week to get a report. So I think people are now looking at what needs to be changed. And actually, if you've got one global payroll provider, you've hopefully got the answers, in a click of a button, rather than having to wait a week to find out information that you do need. But also it's ease as well, isn't it? One global payroll provider, one contract. So there seems to be a lot of positivity to that. But obviously it's choosing the right global payroll provider.
And I think on that sorry to interrupt, but also on that subject, the way Mel mentions questioning, but we also find that if someone's asking something about social securities, but actually also then wants to know what does that mean for the maternity leave or paternity leave, rather than having to say, yeah, I'll go to someone somewhere else and get that information for you, it's a lot easier to put it all together. So I can completely obviously see why these results are as they are, really.
Thanks, James. So moving on to question 21. We asked the respondents, did they feel that their global payroll and HR processes are optimized to give new hires a great onboarding experience? And you can see there around about 14% of people disagree, 34% are on the fence, and overwhelmingly 52% agree that their payroll and HR processes are actually optimized for a great onboarding experience. And I think that's pleasing to hear. It would be really interesting to see if the employees of those organizations feel the same. And I know many organizations do, through tools like Peakon, survey them to find out such results. But yeah, good to see that, at least from a payroll and HR professionals' point of view, that they think they're doing a good job. In terms of bringing those new hires into a business, and whether those hires, whether they be across the globe in disparate locations with a headquarters of that organization based over the other side of the globe, do they all feel like they're one business, was another question we wanted to ask. And you can see there kind of almost 67% of the HR and professionals that we asked felt that those employees felt like they were one business. And again, they're presuming to know, hopefully they're asking, but I think it's insightful that at least our HR and professionals, or the ones that we've surveyed, feel like they're doing a real good job of bringing those employees into the business. And I think that's obviously key, particularly if you're looking to put a number of employees in a new location, that they feel like part of one business, because you want them to feel that, you want them to feel part of that global culture, and you want them to perform in their role as well. So moving on to the last set of questions, one of the things we did here was we asked those same global payroll and HR professionals how they felt their global payroll and HR onboarding experience could be improved. So we'll not go through all the answers, we'll just look at the top three. But you can see here in particular, you've got things like better alignment on local and global working cultures. So making sure whatever's going on in your headquarters, that translates to people, say in one of those global locations, France, James has mentioned earlier. Secondly, simplifying, the local payroll and setup and onboarding, whether that be an organisation onboarding a new country into their global payroll or onboarding a new employee on one of those payrolls as well, and more improved and tailored communications. So James, do you want to give us a view on what you see from these results?
Yeah, well, on the previous slide, the 67% that came back and said the kind of one business sort of thing is great. I think that's a real positive that clients are pulling together over multiple locations. The onboarding process is an interesting one because you've got lots of things to handle. You've got time zones, which is a major thing. So say, for example, East Coast or West Coast to India. There's a huge time difference. So getting the kind of people to feel involved in a business over different time zones is incredibly complex. And then you've got all the different cultures. So it could be that certain things in local countries have to be on paper rather than electronic from a mandatory or compliance perspective or legal requirement locally. And then you have the experience, whether that's through a technology function or whether it's through just a Zoom meeting like this or something similar. The onboarding process is key, and that has an impact thereafter on how people start performing and whether there's something that they will possibly see out a probationary period, all of those sorts of things. So it doesn't surprise me that there's the improved tailored communication piece, alignment of local cultures, because all of these are just so different, and it can be as simple as language to different ways of working within these cultures. I think one point I've mentioned just on this onboard experience piece is that from a HR professional perspective, we've seen a huge shift in the way people work. So remote working has become the norm. 2 years ago, if someone made a request to work from home, we probably all would have said from a HR professional perspective, how do we object to this and how do we stop this happening, because we don't want this to happen. Now it's about how do we embrace this and make this happen, because going back to what we touched on in the previous slides, but you've got a better access to talent, you've kind of got all of the positives to this, and actually people feel more comfortable doing it now.
Thanks, James. So moving to the last set of questions that we asked within the survey. So one of them was question 24, do you feel as if a poor global onboarding experience can impact a new hire's ability to perform in their role? Well, it's no surprise that kind of 79% of payroll and HR professionals agree that it can. So overwhelmingly so. James, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so we've touched on it throughout this whole presentation, but poor onboarding can have negative results, as it says on here. So what we tend to find, clients will like to work on a structure. So it's important you work on the company's values. So keep them as the main kind of lead on all of this sort of thing. Have a real structured onboarding process. Offer personal development or training programs throughout the process. Don't forget that people, even though they've just joined, they still want to develop and evolve. What's really important is stay on top of benefits within that market. So I think Mel touched on earlier about how things change so regularly within the space, but the benefits themselves, it only takes someone to say, I'm a salesperson within this industry. The commission package is great, but talking to a friend down the pub or whatever you want to call it, but they might say, oh, have you got a gym membership scheme? No. Does your company offer that? So that has a real taint on things. So again, staying on top of the benefits and the culture piece and the trends within the market. So mental health is a huge thing that we will talk about at the moment, but mental health and well-being, giving people support and making them feel valued is key.
Thanks, James. So the last question we asked within the survey was on a similar subject. So we asked the respondents, do you agree that support from a single global payroll and HR provider can streamline the efficiencies of your onboarding experience and allow those new hires to perform quicker in role? And in terms of the results, 72% of the respondents agree that absolutely it could do that. So an overwhelming majority certainly think that one single global payroll and HR provider can do that. Mel, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think it's reiterating really what James has said, isn't it? I mean, that's no surprise, is it? And it's similar to the other question with regards to one global and HR provider. You know, it's all about ease now, isn't it? And trying to get the job done. And I think 72% says it all. And it's so important to get the new hire correct, isn't it? Because I think if the onboarding isn't right at word go, then it's almost gives the new employee a sense of what the company could be like, even if that's reality or not. And I think onboarding, getting that right, is actually mostly the most important thing that you should do. We have come across a few stats over the last couple of years, and actually they haven't changed. There's one company in particular, they surveyed American employees, and it came up if there was 2 issues with their paychecks, then they would start looking for another job. So the onboarding part, I think, is so important to get everything right, and also to keep, retain key staff. And I think having one global payroll and HR provider obviously helps with the efficiency of that. You don't want to have 10, 15, 20 different providers. So 72%, I'm not shocked.
Thanks, Mel. So that's probably the summary, the kind of details of the questions. What we thought it was worth doing is just kind of re-emphasizing the 5 key takeaways that we think are really strong out of this survey. And that was around the global vaccination program, and overwhelmingly 64% of the people we surveyed feel more positive about that program, which is great, because that's going to help people get new jobs and go experience new countries, but also, we can get back to hopefully a level of normality. The second thing that's really key is 51% of organizations feel like their payroll and HR processes work so well together, and that's a really great number to build upon. The survey's highlighted some areas where it can be improved, but that's something that payroll and HR professionals will work to, and I'm sure that number will go up if we were to survey people over the next couple of years and decades. The other thing is 66% of people see a big benefit in outsourcing payroll benefits, payments, and HR to a single provider, which is great for organizations just like us, because that's what we do. But it's also great for organizations and businesses across the globe. And we'll go on and unpack that in a couple of slides in a minute. And then the other thing, particularly that was interesting, is just over half of that's a repeat on there, apologies for that, but 72% of organizations feel as if they could get better support from one single provider of payroll and HR is going to help them and their employees perform quicker in role. So that's the survey. Apologies, a lot of stats, a lot of charts, but hopefully some really good insight that you've learned from. What we'll now do is just quickly move into a little bit about IRIS FMP and take you through that, and then we'll get into some of the questions that you may have asked as part of this session. So for anyone that doesn't know, IRIS is a trusted market leader in global payroll and HR. We've got over 30,000 payroll and HR customers from across the globe. We service we deliver those services in 88 countries, which is roughly around about 7 billion, or 90% of the global workforce is covered by the solutions that we offer in those countries. We're very strong in the UK, but we've got customers all around the globe. So we pay 1 in 5 of the UK working population through our software or HR solutions. And we've been around for over 6 decades as well. And you can see just below at the bottom some of the logos and the organizations that trust us or endorse us for the quality of service that we deliver. But what do we do, I hear you ask? Well, we simplify global payroll and HR. And we do that in what we think of 4 simple ways, right? We help organizations through our products and services seamlessly and compliantly onboard people into new countries, and we look to rapidly unlock that investment that you make in that talent by reducing their time to value. We deliver trusted excellence in global payroll and HR. So we take the complexity away of paying people in currencies. We take away the legislation, we sort out the benefits, and that allows you to ensure that your growing global workforce are paid on time every time. We also have a kind of network of both local knowledge, so local expertise, whether they be in payroll or HR. But we've also got global experts as well, global experts that help with global mobility, can harmonize sort of terms and conditions across the globe, and can kind of help you deliver a global sort of employee value proposition. And then the last thing we do, which James will kind of talk to in a little bit more detail, is we've got services that flex with your growth. So if you've got, whether it be 1 employee in France, or you've got 200 employees across the globe, we've got solutions that can kind of flex with your growth. But let me kind of unpack that a little bit for you, just to kind of explain one of the ways we help businesses. As an organization looks to kind of onboard a new hire in a new country, it can be a very steep learning curve. And what you find is a lot of HR professionals, payroll professionals, if they don't know and it's new to them, you know, they'll ask their peers, they'll go to Google, and it can be quite a steep learning curve, and that can delay you hiring a candidate and that candidate starting and effectively beginning to contribute to your organization and reach their max potential. And what that kind of timeline from contributing to reaching your max potential is called in HR the employee lifetime value. Now, because Iris has done this on hundreds of occasions, putting candidates in countries, we've got a playbook for it, right? So we know what benefits you need. We know how to create an employee value proposition. We can also, through our kind of outsourced recruitment service, we can help you find a better candidate, which what that should mean is that candidate can start earlier, they can contribute sooner, and you can get higher output. And what that does 2 things, right? That helps you reduce your costs and also increase your performance of that candidate through hiring a better candidate. And that's where we think we can unlock some ROI for your organization. And that kind of fits nicely in that kind of 72% of the respondents in the survey felt that if they could get all this from one provider, that it would help that new hire kind of perform quicker. But I'm going to hand over to James now, that's going to explain a little bit around the services that we offer.
Thank you. So I think what's important to look at from our overall proposition perspective is actually we keep the essence that our clients are the employer. So there are obviously a few different solutions that are offered in the market out there, but what we're saying is that you or client are the employer. We can offer services throughout the whole employee life cycle. So that can be all the way from attraction through to separation. Unfortunately, people do leave. Our services can be anything from standard consultancy services or services as a whole, so without the advisory piece within that. And then we also have software solutions. But we break it down through to the attraction, recruitment, onboarding, development, retention, and separation piece, which I think from a very basic perspective, we can offer standard onboarding solutions, payroll and payments. So clients going into a country, get them onboarded compliantly, employment contracts, pay them locally, do the social security contributions, do the mandatory benefits, and do the payments. And then we have kind of a middle tier of services that clients will, or majority of clients adopt, which can be the full kind of consultancy services sort of piece, which I've mentioned the mandatory benefits and the standard compliance from a payroll perspective, but there's so much more to that. So when you go into a country, you might not want to be the bog standard basic piece. You might want to offer PMI in those locations, an enhancement to the mandatory pieces within that. You might want to do something a bit jazzy when it comes to the onboarding process. You might want to design that. You might want to have ongoing employee relations support because you don't know how to answer questions when it comes to disciplinary services. Or you might want to manage your leaves. Not everything is like the US. There is holiday leave, there's different maternity, paternity leaves, there's sick leave, all of these sorts of things that just our clients don't know the answers to. And then we have a full kind of all-encompassing package after, and I think this slide calls it Max, but generally this is everything that we do. So we offer a software solution to be able to support our services piece. And by that software piece, it offers more of a human capital management system. So employees or managers, everyone feels a bit more engaged through the platforms that we offer. And this is, we have different names for these sorts of services, but in essence, it can be a budgeted solution, which is based on headcounts and locations, so you don't need to worry about usage or that sort of piece. You also notice at the bottom here, there are a few exceptions to the software. One of the reasons why we leave payroll software off and benefits software is because we find most of our clients have their own solutions they want to work with. So in that situation, we'll provide reporting that can input into the current solutions and we'll work upon those. And I'm not saying that we're not used to working on different HCM systems because our consultants, our experts that are available for you to talk to day in, day out, are used to working on different systems. One thing that is obviously worth mentioning here is that it's not fixed. It's not like we have to do everything and you have to work within our rules. What our ambition is to be a fairly integrated piece or member of your teams to help with either global expansion or countries that you're just not comfortable with. I think the next slide, Fran, I'm not sure whether it's yet. This kind of outlines a bit more what sort of things, again, these aren't explicitly what we do, but this gives a high level overview of the certain pieces that are broken down within our payroll and HR services. I'd encourage you all to kind of look through certain pieces within this, and you might see certain areas that you might think, oh, that's on our agenda at the moment, or lots of people don't realise that we do global mobility or M&A services, and by M&A, mergers and acquisitions, if you're looking at growing, people don't necessarily always want to build, they might want to acquire. So if you want us to do an audit or if you're getting ready for sale, again, getting things ready for you, we'd be happy to come in and help with those sorts of services. And I think that's my last slide before the Q&A session. On it, there's one more I think Fran's going to cover.
Yep.
But one thing you may all be thinking, and I did it when I joined this business, is what does FMP stand for? Obviously, we've spoken a bit about IRIS. It does what it says on the tin. It's fully managed. The P bit is payroll, but it could be fully managed HR, fully managed payroll for people in that capacity.
Yeah, and I think you've summarised that well, James. I think that the three things we help businesses and organisations with is effectively compliance, to ensure their compliance in either a new country or the countries they're in. We kind of accelerate and enable productivity, so we can you can effectively outsource a lot of your people and HR issues to us, either a little bit or a lot, and that can allow you to focus on some more of the kind of aspirational HR objectives that you may have. And then engagement as well. We can help put together a really great kind of employee value proposition, and we can help you harmonize that across the globe, and we can get your employees working really fast as well. And effectively that kind of leads us nicely, just with a tagline that I'll leave on the screen, onto the Q&A session. But before I do that, I'd like to thank everyone for their kind of time today, and listening to the three of us drone on about a subject we're really passionate about. If you've got any kind of follow-ups, there'll be obviously a recording sent out as per Mel's kind of intro. We've also got the insightful white paper that we're about to release next week, so look out for that as well. And more importantly, don't forget to check out the members section of GPA. Iris FMP has got a lot of great content in there that'll help you get started in the country as well. So Mel, hand back to you for Q&A.
I just wanted to say, actually, the insights that FMP, Iris FMP have provided us are fantastic. So our members do actually love that section. I think we've got over 20 country information on employment, employment and payroll. So it's a fantastic tool. Okay.
Sorry, Mel, to interrupt on that note. So the countries that we mentioned within that platform, again, it's not just those. So if there's anything that anyone wants that's not contained within that piece, just reach out to us or reach out to Mel, and we can happily obviously provide information on other countries. We
would definitely love more, James.
From everyone.
We're going to regret it, and this is recorded, so there you go. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions. So the first one is, what if we don't have a legal entity? Where do they stand?
So from a legal entity standpoint, there are various things that need to be considered. Obviously, what people are going to be doing within those countries, and whether it is beneficial to have an entity established there, and that's from a tax and accountancy perspective. But if you don't, and the country is available for us to go in and do a payroll registration for you, it's fairly simple. So if we use the UK as an example, we may need to set up bank accounts, etc., for you when it comes to pension contributions, etc. But going into the UK, register for a payroll registration, set you up for social securities, or localised within the UK, it's national insurance, etc. And then start obviously doing the deductions at source and all that sort of piece. But that's relatively straightforward. It's not essential in every country you have a legal entity. There are some exceptions to that, like India, China, Japan. And if that is the situation that you do, then we'll help our clients set all of that up and go through that process with them and support them through that.
Thanks, James. We've got a question from Zenny. Thank you, Zenny. Which area has had most hardest change in regulations due to COVID-19 that impact payroll? Your opinion might not be covered in the survey.
So there isn't one specific, and that is a very difficult question to answer, because albeit we're currently supporting 88 different countries, and I don't know all of them off the top of my head. We do actually support more than 88 countries, we're just not active in all of them at the moment. What we have seen is furlough, when things started happening, was the major player of how to, every country did things very differently. And if you looked at Italy obviously was one of the kind of first countries that had a bit of a breakout following China. They've got collective agreements that come into place and works councils, etc. So you've got to consider those, the furlough rules that come in thereafter, and how the payments are made. That has its complexities, but then you've also got the work rules that support all of these countries. So France has different work rules to the UK. Australia, fortunately, has been relatively better, kind of lightly hit, albeit it's on lockdown currently. New Zealand, all of those sorts of places are fairly simple, but that's not to say things won't evolve there either. But I think probably our biggest challenge, because employment law is so strict in these locations, is places like Germany, because if you get one thing wrong in Germany, it's quite risky.
Okay. In some parts of the world, the pandemic has caused a lot of social unrest. Do you think this will slow global expansion down?
sorry to keep taking the light, Fran. You're obviously welcome to chip in.
No, you take that one, James.
So with any, I'm always an optimist. I know that obviously we can't say that COVID was a good thing, because it's not. It was terrible, and lots of people died, and there was lots of obviously unsettling things that are happening all over the world. But what it does do is create opportunity. So there's what we've seen in the market at the moment is that there's a huge amount of talent available to people, and whether that's because everyone's actually embracing new locations. Is it any different working from Romania to Poland? Is the talent more available in Poland than it is in Romania? All of these sorts of things. Or is the cost of employing someone there a bit easier? So it can vary. And to kind of summarize the question, is with every challenge there's new opportunity, and with that, companies are embracing it. So we're all under strict guidance to grow and create more revenue and create new opportunity and make our products better and all these sorts of things. So yeah, the opportunity is there.
I think just to build on that, James, as well, I think what clearly, if you roll back 18 months, you had a culture of office working, right? That's moving quite rapidly towards remote working. And I think you'll have a scenario in the next couple of years where people will begin to choose which country they want to work from, and to get that talent across the globe, your organizations will have to be a lot more flexible. So I think it will mean that invariably businesses will go more global, because people will want to choose where they work.
Yeah, and I used to fly into the US about 8 times a year and meet clients and partners, etc., that we were going over there. And I was always in awe going into the big tech businesses in San Francisco and going to their cool, funky offices where they're whizzing around on scooters and beer pumps in the offices and all those sorts of things. Well, now I can't imagine that I'm going to need to go back over, where everyone's become so comfortable working online like this and having meetings online like this. And actually, I find it a lot more engaging. If you see someone's children running around in the background or their cat jumping on the desk, you make them feel a lot more personable, and those business relationships are becoming a bit more intimate. And I think those relationships are going to last for a lot longer.
Yeah, I think we're definitely in the middle of a part of history, aren't we? Changing the way, I think the Industrial Revolution I had to learn for home history A level, and now this is another part of the way, a change of the way we work, isn't it? There'll be the hybrid solution, and you can pretty much work anywhere in the world, can't you? So we've got another question. What is your view on increasing use of third-party employment models?
So because it's not something that we necessarily do ourselves, we work with partners, and there are companies out there that we recommend, and there's certainly a time and place for it. Entry to market, and on Fran's side, when he's talking about timelines, you don't just have to employ people in March. It can be any time of the year. It was just kind of a January to December thing. But the entry to market, so the third-party employment can really work very quickly if you need to put an engineer in a location or a salesperson in a location for a very short period of time, like 3 months. The feedback we've had is that can be quite expensive over a period of time, if it's kind of longer than 6 months to a year. And setting up a traditional payroll service and HR service where you're owning the employees, owning them is probably the wrong term, but you know what I mean. Looking at owning those employees for that period. My personal concern about third-party employment is I believe it's going to become a lot more regulated in the near future, and having an employee that's got a third party, that you've got benefits that are provided by that third party, but someone in a different location's got different benefits and they're not under the same contract but they're doing the same job. To me, it sounds a bit complex, and I think it's going to be something that's going to become a lot more regulated.
I think it's definitely a watch this space moment, isn't it?
Yeah, but it is an industry that's booming, and as I said, the main benefits to it is entry to market is very quick.
Do you have, so obviously we've talked about Europe and Asia, but do you have US based expertise?
Yeah, so we're very lucky. We don't explicitly say US. We've got a business that we also own in Canada, through acquisition over time. But yes, so we have salespeople and account management team within the US. We also have staff working locally. We don't cover, well, we cover every state. We don't have people in every state, but it's certainly a territory that we're active in. Hence why it's probably not a need necessary for me to go over 8 times a year now. And Fran will probably sit in Midlands somewhere and not jump on the plane. But yeah, we do have people over there. I
think I actually miss getting on a plane, if I'm being honest with you.
I'm 6'4". It's not a particularly comfortable experience.
I'm 5'6", so that's what it's going to be. I'd hate sitting next to you.
Yeah, it's my armrest.
Okay, so you mentioned how many countries you covered. So the last question that I think we've got time for is, can you support more than one country at a time?
Yeah, so how we tend to work, and we didn't really touch on it, but how we tend to work is that if our client is an English speaking location, mainly US and UK, but we've obviously got clients in Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, I'm just trying to pick countries that speak English, is they will have a single point of contact. Single is probably a stretch, probably 2 people, someone to manage the payroll, someone to manage the HR. They're all experienced, qualified professionals that can have that conversation, and that will always be in English. But that payroll manager or senior consultant will be leading them in a majority of territories. That's not to say that that individual that will be leading them and looking after them won't have people around them working. But from a coordination perspective, it will be as easy and as straightforward as possible. Our biggest clients probably in just under 20 countries, but we don't need all of those countries. We're happy to support just one. But it's what our ambition is, to grow with the client and help them go into different kind of countries. And we've got testimonials on our website talking about how we've helped businesses grow and IPO, etc. From there. But yeah, it's not explicitly just one, but it's not tied to 20.
Thanks. Fran, we just had one question that's just come in. I don't know if we've got time just to quickly ask it. So we've run a round table on this subject, and it's on pay on demand. Is it increasing too? And I know in the UK it's a subject that has people sort of mixed feelings. Do you guys have any opinions on that before we go?
Yeah, I've got a very strong opinion on it. I think domestically, it will become the norm within the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah. I think the majority of people can consume everything on a mobile phone. I don't see any reason why not just they shouldn't be able to consume their pay slip, but they should take some of the salary that they've earned, and they shouldn't have to wait for an end of month payroll process. I think globally that becomes a lot more complex just because of the infrastructure of either local payroll engines or a global payroll solution. But you can see in the States, it's even more stronger in the UK. It's coming. I think it's just how organizations deliver it. I'm not particularly a fan of kind of lending money or that kind of thing. It should be the ability to draw down your money quickly. But technology and some of the UK and global banking system needs to catch up to allow that to happen.
From a HR perspective on that, and not to necessarily disagree, Fran, but there is always other things that companies can do because obviously pay on demand is a benefit to a degree. There are other benefits that companies can offer to kind of sidestep that if they feel it's going to be a challenge moving forward, whether it's access to certain things or different benefits within that marketplace, and obviously we can happily advise on that.
Yeah. Well, I know within the UK, the payroll specialists are like get the legislation right to make it work. So it's definitely, I think you could have a whole webinar on that subject. So maybe that's something that we need to look at in the future. So that's all the questions from us or from this side, Fran.
Thanks, Mel, and thank you guys for taking the time to come to the webinar and listening to what we've had to say. Your time is greatly appreciated, and if you want to find out a little bit more about IRIS-FMP, visit our website, go to Google, speak to Mel. We're happy to talk about your global expansion plans and how we can help you.
Great, thanks then everyone. And as I said, this will be available post, tomorrow morning. And if you have any questions, please contact myself, Fran or James, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. So thanks once again.